Good afternoon. Today I'm going to read a letter. Today I'm reading from The New God Image by Edward Edinger, and I'm going to read a letter that Dr. Jung wrote to a student in June of 1960, so about 1 year before his death. There's this footnote contained with the letter. In this letter, Smith had reported a conversation with Buber in which the latter had accused Jung of being a monologist, having reduced God to an object and maintaining that Jung's statements that without man no God would be possible was an ontological denial of God. The letter was addressed to Mr. Smith, then in Villanova, Pennsylvania. Now, or at the time of the writing of The New God Image, assistant professor of philosophy and religion at Trent State University, at Trenton State College, New Jersey. At the time of writing, Smith was preparing a thesis, quote, a critical analysis of religious and philosophical issues between Buber and Jung. So here's the letter. Dear Mr. Smith, Buber and I start from an entirely different basis. I make no transcendental statements. I am essentially empirical. As I have stated more than once, I am dealing with psychic phenomena and not with metaphysical assertions. God, within the framework of psychic events, I find the fact of the belief in God. It says God is. This is the fact I am concerned with. I am not concerned with the truth or untruth of God's existence. I am concerned with the statement only, and I am interested in its structure and behavior. It is an emotionally toned complex like the father or mother complex or the Oedipus complex. It is obvious that if man does not exist, no such statement can exist either, nor can anybody prove that the statement God exists in a non-human sphere. What Buber misunderstands as Gnosticism is psychiatric observation, of which he obviously knows nothing. It is certainly not my invention. Buber has been led astray by a poem in Gnostic style I made 44 years ago for a friend's birthday celebration, a private print, a poetic paraphrase of the psychology of the unconscious. Every pioneer is a monologist until other people have tried out his method and confirmed his results. Would you call all the great minds which are not popular among their contemporaries monologists, even that voice of one crying in the wilderness? Buber, having no practical experience in depth psychology, does not know of the autonomy of complexes, a most easily observable fact, however. Thus God, as an autonomous complex, is a subject confronting me. One must be really blind if one cannot get that from my books. Likewise, the self is a redoubtable reality, as everybody learns who has tried or was compelled to do something about it. Yet I define the self as a borderline concept. This must be a puzzler for people like Buber, who are unacquainted with the empiricists, epistemology. Why cannot Buber get into his head that I deal with psychic facts and not with metaphysical assertions? Buber is a theologian and has far more information about God's true existence and other of his qualities than I could ever dream of acquiring. My ambitions are not soaring to theological heights. I am merely concerned with the practical and theoretical problem of how do complexes behave. For instance, how does a mother complex behave in a child and in an adult? How does the God complex behave in different individuals and societies? How does the self complex compare with the lapis philosophorum in Hermetic philosophy, and with the Christ figure in patristic allegories, with Al-Qidr in Islamic tradition, with Tifereth in the Kabbalah, with Mithras, Attis, Odin, Krishna, and so on? As you see, I am concerned with images, human phenomena, of which only the ignorant can assume that they are within our control or that they can be reduced to mere objects. Every psychiatrist and psychotherapist can tell you to what an enormous degree man is delivered over to the terrific power of a complex which has assumed superiority over his mind. Vide, compulsion, neurosis, schizophrenia, drugs, political and private nonsense, etc. Mental possessions are just as good as ghosts, demons, and gods. It is the task of the psychologist to investigate these matters. The theologian certainly has not done it yet. I am afraid it is sheer prejudice against science which hinders theologians from understanding my empirical standpoint, since from this standpoint the experience of God is nolens volens, the psychic fact that I find myself confronted with, a factor in myself more or less represented also by external circumstances, which proves to me to be an insurmountable power. For instance, a most rational professor of philosophy is entirely possessed by the fear of cancer, which he knows does not exist. Try to liberate such an unfortunate fellow from his predicament, and you will get an idea of psychic autonomy. I am sorry if X bothers about the question of the basis upon which religion rests. This is a metaphysical question, the solution of which I do not know. I am concerned with phenomenal religion, with its observable facts, to which I try to add a few psychological observations about basic events in the collective unconscious, the existence of which I can prove. Beyond this, I know nothing, and I have never made any assertions about it. How does Buber know of something he cannot experience psychologically? How is such a thing possible at all? If not in the psyche, then where else? You see, it is always the same matter, the complete misunderstanding of the psychological argument. God, within the frame of psychology, is an autonomous complex, a dynamic image, and that is all psychology is ever able to state. It cannot know more about God. It cannot prove or disprove God's actual existence. But it does know how fallible images in the human mind are. If Niels Bohr compares the model of atomic structure with a planetary system, he knows it is merely a model of a transcendent and unknown reality. And if I talk of the God image, I do not deny a transcendental reality. I merely insist on the psychic reality of the God. I merely insist on the psychic reality of the God complex or the God image, as Niels Bohr proposes the analogy of a planetary system. as Niels Bohr proposes the analogy of a planetary system. He would not be as dumb as to believe that his model is an exact and true replica of the atom. No empiricist in his senses would believe his models to be the eternal truth itself. He knows too well how many changes any kind of reality undergoes in becoming a conscious representation. All my ideas are names, models, and hypotheses for a better understanding of observable facts. I never dreamt that intelligent people could misunderstand them as theological statements, i.e., as hypotheses. I was obviously too naive in this regard, and that is the reason why I was sometimes not careful enough to repeat time and again, quote, "But what I mean is only the psychic image of a noumenon." But what I mean is only the psychic image of a noumenon, unquote. Kant's thing in itself, which is not a negation, as you know. My empirical standpoint is so disappointingly simple that it needs only an average intelligence and not a... Oh my goodness. Okay. My empirical standpoint is so disappointingly simple that it needs only an average intelligence and a bit of common sense to understand it, but it needs an uncommon amount of prejudice or even ill will to misunderstand it, as it seems to me. I'm sorry if I bore you with my commonplace, but you asked for it. You can find them in most of my books, beginning with the year 1912, almost half a century ago, and not yet noticed by authorities like Buber. I have spent a lifetime of work on psychological and psychopathological investigations. Buber criticizes me in a field in which he is incompetent and which he does not even understand. Sincerely yours, C.G. Jung. Well, I guess he told him. Okay, so that is the letter to Robert C. Smith from Dr. Carl G. Jung, dated 29 June 1960, and it was in response to a request for information by Robert Smith, who was writing a thesis called A Critical Analysis of Religious and Philosophical Issues between Buber and Jung. So he got an earful from the good Dr. Jung. And so that's all I have for today. I'm sorry it's short, but I thought you might want to hear that. I've been reading from The New God Image by Edward Edinger, and Dr. Edinger has commented on 14 letters which Dr. Jung wrote to theologians. I'm in the process of reading these letters into the channel with permission, and I have about, let's see, I only have 5 left to go. So if you look at the playlist, Blunt Psychiatrist versus Theologians, you will be able to listen to the other ones. In my view, the most important of these is the latter part of Dr. Jung's letter to the Reverend David Cox, dated September 25, 1957. And you can find that on the homepage of the YouTube channel. So, having said all that, and hello, Jonathan, thank you for being here. I'm going to discontinue this live feed for the moment.